Hello and welcome to the Scuttlebutt podcast. I'm your host, Brock Briggs, and each week I bring you a conversation with a current or former service member at the top of their craft. These conversations will make you smarter, they'll help you explore new ideas that challenge you personally and professionally, and they'll make you more money. Today I'm speaking with Josh Thompson, a former Army medevac pilot and now a fractional CFO. In this conversation, we talk about the family dynamics of the military and how to live for your legacy and not your resume. We hear about Josh's experience in command of several field hospitals in the Army and how he managed finances for several struggling activities. He also goes in depth on the challenges facing medical services, both in a civilian capacity and in the service from a readiness perspective. I hit him with a hot question of whether or not pregnant women should be allowed in the service or not as well. You'll have to listen through to hear his take on that. We also talk about some of the financial challenges SMB owners face and the best practices for having clean financials in operations, M&A, and raising money. You can find this episode as well as all other Scuttlebutt episodes, transcripts, weekly newsletter, and the YouTube channel, all at scuttlebuttpodcast.co. Please enjoy this episode with Josh Thompson. What do you think is the thing that you're most anticipating about this PCS move that you guys are going through as a family?
I think for me, the thing I'm anticipating the most is just it's like how do we reconnect, right? I got, my three kids are they're 12, 14, and 16. The social dynamics there are now a lot stronger. Like when they were little, it was no big deal to pick up and move. They didn't have all these same ties and connections, and now they're on all these club and travel sports teams. My daughter plays club volleyball. My son's on a club travel soccer team. My youngest is all plugged in with a pee wee football, and it's like, man, all the kind of the social aspects are a lot more important for them now. And so I think as far as like plugging in a new community, it's like how do we hit the ground when we get to our new duty station? How do we get them reconnected? And then just kind of stabilize the family. It's much more disruptive at this point. This will be my daughter's third high school in 3 years, and so that's hard when you're a kid, and the friendship dynamics are as important as they are when you're in your teens. So
Mhm.
I think that's one of the things where I'm really kind of like, I don't know if I'm anticipating it, but it's like, okay, how do we minimize the turbulence, in this season of transition?
How has your approach to PCSing and uprooting and kind of moving your family around, how has that changed over time because you've done so many of them through either through your service or now your wife's still on active duty? What's different? And have you learned anything that is like, oh, this is the most important thing when it comes to kind of having a successful PCS?
The approach has definitely changed as the family has grown, right? Like when it was just my wife and I, it was sort of like, okay, cool. Like, where do we want to live? Wherever in the community around there was the fun stuff. There was maybe a little bit of an aspect of like, should we live on base or should we live off base? Because if we live off base, then we could, maybe pick up an investment property, something like that. But now the approach has very much changed to like, how do we minimize the, how do we create the least amount of turbulence or the smallest wake to kind of minimize the impact to everybody. And so now, a lot of the decisions are around like, I mentioned, my kids' sports, right? So it's like, okay, where's the good club volleyball team? Where's the good schools? While still kind of balancing, like we don't want to have this crazy commute to and from the base. Is it a good place for us to invest? Like one of our things that we've always done is we generally will buy a house wherever we go. We use that VA loan and make an investment, and that's worked very well for us. With the exception of I'm Army, so with the exception of Fort Irwin, California, which is way out in the middle of the Mojave Desert, like think 29 Palms for all the Navy and the Marine guys. It's everywhere else that we've gone. We basically have bought a house and turned it into a rental property after we left. And so we generally think like, okay, is it a good place to invest? Are there good schools? And that goes along with the investment. Generally, if you can find a place in an area with good schools, that's a good place to invest. Are there good athletics for our kids? And then usually the commute is sort of the last major decision criteria factor that goes in there. Yeah, I think those are probably the biggest approaches to PCS. I think the other thing that's really changed over time is like we are very deliberate about just kind of being more organized and more mobile. Like after this is our 11th PCS, and so like my storage room is it looks like somebody's dream storage room. Like everything's tough boxes and it's labeled, and it's just you move so many times that you get PO'd it. You can't find stuff when you need it. And so over the years, we've kind of developed sort of a very mobile and portable organization system.
Does that kind of give you the feeling of just like maybe nowhere as home? I think I like struggled with that even just 4 years, and I changed duty stations, but stayed in the same local area. And that was only one time. And man, it just felt like constant feeling of just not belonging. And also like, staying in 1 year in an apartment, and then you're, 2 months in and you're finally unpacked. And then you're like, why would I even hang anything on the wall? Like, why would I, and why would I even decorate? Cause I'm just going to leave. How do you, what are your feelings about that?
Yeah, absolutely. My I don't remember the context of the situation, but somebody actually uh, asked one of my kids like that same question. They asked my youngest, and we have this sign that we hang on the wall, and it says "Home is where the army sends us." And it was like a gift that somebody gave us years ago. We've kind of always put it up by the front door. And someone asked my 12-year-old son, like, oh, like, where's home for you? And he literally said, like, home is where the army sends us, and like we kind of have the thing from calling it's a joke, but like it really is like they don't identify with any one location. And interestingly, like you and I had talked around transition. And as like I retired a year ago, my wife she's at 18 and some change. And so, we'll do this next assignment, and then she plans to retire out of this next job. Um, and a lot of our conversations have been around like, where are we going to go? Like where do we want to settle? And I don't we have like the one thing we've arrived at, the one conclusion is that we have zero affiliation or ties with any one place, right? We just feel kind of nomadic. And my wife's basically like, let's just wherever our daughter goes to college, like maybe we should just kind of go there and be close and be a support, structure for her. But then I'm like, well, then, we still have the boys so this next year, my middle son will be starting his freshman year of high school. My youngest will be starting seventh grade. And then my daughter's just 2 years from graduation. She'll be going into her junior year. And it's like, okay, like one of our discussions has been around, okay, do we just go to this next place and stay there for 6 years and kind of get all three kids through high school and then we move? Or, when she makes her break from the army in 2 years, um, do we then pick up and go somewhere else? And it's still this big question mark. And we're kind of taking the approach that like we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But yeah, that's a long answer to your short question. That's like, yeah, we definitely don't feel tied or anchored to any one location. And um, I joke with my wife, I say like we should just buy a sailboat and like move to the British Virgin Islands or something. Like,
Yeah, that doesn't sound too bad after a career in the military, that's for sure.
yeah.
You were telling me about some friends that you have that were kind of going through a difficult time in their marriage after like one of them had returned home from a deployment, and it just like looking at the family unit and how that gets shaped by what the military asks of you, whether it be PCS, whether it be deployment, or just even the hours demanded. It's like it's a miracle that anybody is together. Like I truly mean that. And people that have really strong, successful marriages that have spent a lifetime in the military, I applaud that so much because it is so, so challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the story that I was sharing with you is a friend of mine, and it's a couple, so I'm friends with both the husband and the wife. My wife and I are good friends with them. They're in a Bible study group that we have and that we host in our. It's online. It's Zoom based, and it's with a bunch of different military families that we've connected with over the years. And anyways, the husband and this couple just came back from a 9-month deployment to Europe, where they were, engaged with the whole Ukrainian conflict and whatnot. And long story short, he called me 2 or 3 days ago, and he was in tears, and he's like, Josh, I don't know what to do, man. Like, this is my seventh deployment, but this reintegration has been the hardest, and my wife basically told me that she wants to leave me, um, and that there's nothing left, and he's like, I'm devastated, and it was heartbreaking to hear, and we're struggling with, like, how do we help them from afar, other than just emotional support and encouraging them, but yeah, to your point, like, I don't know where the analogy came from or who created it, but somebody somewhere, shared the metaphor of, the military is like a magnifying glass, where it's going to magnify anything that it touches, right? And so if it's a marriage, if there's flaws in that marriage, it's going to magnify those flaws, right? If there's any weakness, it's going to exacerbate that, and it's going to, focus on those weaknesses. It's going to bring them to the surface and to light, and that, and that can be really hard, right? That's a very stressful. Uh, uh, it's a hard job. We ask so much of our service members, just to pick up and move and leave, and to just unplug on a moment's notice. I have another friend who's in the special operations community, and literally got like a 911 kind of call, and got on an airplane, and went to Africa, just in recent days, based on some of the recent geopolitical events that are happening there that you may have seen in the news. And that was literally like 4 hours notice, and he was gone, right? And so now, his wife and his kids are just like rolling with it, like totally unplanned, unscheduled deployment, and who knows how long he's been gone for. And so, it does shine both ways, or it does magnify both ways, right? Like, when there's a really strong marriage, it can highlight that, and it can, really, you see the good and the greatness that can come out of that. I'm very proud to say that, my wife and I have been married for 19 years. In August, it'll be 20. And I feel like, a lot of the trials and deployments that we've been through have really kind of strengthened our marriage. But at the same time, it absolutely did highlight and kind of magnify and reveal to us where there was weakness, right, in our relationship and in our marriage. So, yeah, it's a high stress career field, and I don't think that everyone comes into it with that type of eyes wide open, awareness of like what it can do. And that's, I'm speaking of with 20 years of experience, but I know that even, with people that just are, single termers and do a single enlistment, or we have other, young officers that I've mentored over the years that, they just do their 4 years and their payback and they get out, because it's like, man, this is crazy. I don't know how people do this.
Mhm. There's My wife has been having a lot of interesting discussions because the positioning of what the service means to people is so unique when it comes to family. There's a certain element of security that is embedded into working in the military. You have a steady paycheck, you're going to eat, you're going to have a place to stay. And as my wife prepares to exit, people are asking her like, "Oh, you're pregnant," and then they find out she's getting out, and they're like, it's like a shaming activity. Like, "Oh, well, why would you get out? You have a family," like kind of make her feel bad that like, oh, like family is a priority. And it's just a super strange dynamic that we one, it's hard to do that, to make a career anyway, and then to raise a good family on top of that, absolutely doable. But it's a hostile environment. And like you said, if you don't have your ducks in a row, any kind of bad thing is gonna could flare up and cause a really, really big riff.
Yeah, I think, I think that's the challenge, right? Of an extremist organization. Are you familiar with that term, an extremist?
I mean, I've heard the word, but not referred to.
So there's a book called
Okay.
Extremist Leadership by a guy named Tom Colditz, right? And he talks about like, there's different types of leadership. So you have like transactional, right? So you're doing something for me, and then there's a transaction that happens, right? And then there's transformational, right? Which is where like I'm 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 pouring into you, I'm mentoring you, right? You're growing, you're developing because of this leadership relationship. And so like if you think of like transactional as like you're a McDonald's manager, right? And you're just like, hey man, I need you to go do the fries and clean the restrooms and take care of these customers. And there's not a lot of like, you're not you're not doing anything transformative or mentoring or growing them. And then you get to like maybe another corporate America or even the military, in some aspects. And there's some transformation that's happening, right? Somebody's pouring into you, they're mentoring you, they're growing you. That's transformational. But then really, the military, like police, fire, military, these are these extreme cases where like it's life or death, right? I'm doing this and I'm investing in you because like my life literally depends on you and the actions that you take, right? I have to 100% be all in and trust you. And it's not like that in every aspect of the military, but you know, there's a lot of aspects of the military where it is like that. And that's what Colditz in his book says is in extremis, right? Like it's a different level, right? That's where like, you see the videos of like I forget the guy's name, but there's a video of like an Army Medal of Honor recipient where he like carries his wounded buddy, puts him on the medevac aircraft, and then right before the aircraft takes off, he like leans in and he kisses him. And it's like that level of like, I love you, man, right? Like we're all in. I'm willing to put my life down and die for you. Like that's the an extremis version of it. And I think the hard part about that's a beautiful thing about the service in the military. But I think the hard thing that also comes from that is like that expectation that like you're 100% all in. There's no like one foot in, one foot out, right? I expect you to give it everything and prioritize this over your family. And so when you don't prioritize it over your family, or maybe like, hey, I got a kid on the way now, right? Or maybe like, hey man, my marriage is about to fall apart. And the harsh reality is that like while we have programs that are out there to support it, at the end of the day, right, it's mission first. And that's the mindset. Those GOs are making decisions based on like geopolitical threats and national security decisions, not based on like what's this going to do to Josh or Brock's marriage, right? And so like again, it's going to magnify that. I think the challenging part is that like you're going to have leaders and other people that you work with that are prioritizing their careers first, right? Like I actually retired in June of 22, um, and all of my peers just promoted to '06. I retired as a '05, and all my peers just promoted. And I had some friends reach out and are like, dude, you should be here like pinning on too. And I was like, no, man, no, I shouldn't. Right. Like my family is more important than, my ego and the rank. Ryan Holiday's got a great book called Ego is the Enemy. Have you read that one?
I haven't, but Ryan Holiday is the man.
Yeah, his
I
books are
love him.
great. But that book, Ego is the Enemy, it really highlights it. And I think that's a dangerous thing, right? It was like I have friends in the military that will willfully choose to take like a CONUS assignment in a different place than where their family's at. And their spouses are like, I'm not moving, And so they will go like on a 3-year CONUS assignment to some other place geographically separated from their families and geobatch it because they're like grinding and striving to climb the ladder. And you're just like, man, like I feel like your priorities are totally out of whack. and people make decisions like that. For me, it was, the army was like, hey, you need to come back to the Pentagon. And I was like, no, my family's going to this other place. My wife and kids are going there. Like I'll take the job if I can work remotely. And they're like, no. So I was like, okay, cool. Well, then here's my retirement papers. And I'm totally at peace with that. But a lot of people aren't. And you see people just like keep hustling and grinding. Um, I had another friend who uh, was a long time O6, and after many years of being an O6, ultimately didn't get picked up to be a GO, and literally was like in tears. Like, I gave my life to this, and his entire identity was wrapped up in his rank and his position, and it was just, it crushed him. I think there's a good Colin Powell video out there where he talks about, like, he goes to the same conference one year and he's the Secretary of State, and he talks about how, like, they chauffeur him in a limousine, and they shepherd him through security, and they bring him up on stage, and he's got like a special coffee cup and all this stuff. And then, like, the next year he's not the Secretary of State, he goes back and he's literally like makes his own reservations, he's Ubering there, and he's got like his coffee. He said he was reflecting because he's like got his coffee in a styrofoam cup, and he's like, man, it was all about, it was this revelation that it was all about the position, it wasn't about him. And I think sometimes we get caught up in the trap, or the sense of pride and the ego of like, oh man, like, I'm a colonel, or I'm a sergeant major, or a master chief, or whatever. But the reality is, you're just another dude that puts your pants on like everybody else. And I think we kind of, our identities get confused sometimes.
Big time. I felt that in a big way when I got out. Even only 4 years, felt a large sense of accomplishment that was tied to that rank, and just things that are now in the past and be a line in a history book somewhere. And I also thought that it would be much different getting out and like going to work at another job, but I quickly found out it's just a different ladder. It's a ladder with less spikes on it, perhaps, but a ladder nonetheless. And I think highlights the fact that much of life's fulfillment likely won't come from your job,
Mhm.
or it shouldn't. It's going to be coming from, you know, relationships, your impact, and sometimes those you can marry those. I think that that's the dream, and I will be curious to hear how your current like work status and what you're doing is kind of aligning with what you kind of find fulfillment in. But yeah, it's a dangerous game to be playing. We're all kind of just, I think we're after a lot of the same things.
Yeah, I don't remember who said it or where I heard it, but recently somebody was just talking about like um when you die, right? Are they going to talk about your resume, or your legacy? And it's like, what is more, like, where are you investing? I think it was like a Sahil Bloom tweet or something like that, where he was talking about time, and you can, are you spending your life kind of stacking up all these resume accomplishments, or are you investing where it's the legacy, like what the people at your funeral are going to talk about? Because when you have your funeral, they're going to talk about like all your resume stuff. So I like his stuff.
Yeah, very smart and very well. He can talk very well. Simplifies things. I really enjoy his work. I think now we're kind of fully fleshed in here. I would love to kind of zoom out and hear maybe like a 2 to 3 minute high level view of kind of how you landed where you're at today.
Yeah, sure. So, I went off to college. I went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida. I was a aerospace engineering student. I did ROTC, and my plan was just to like do my 4 years, get out, and then go be an engineer, work for NASA or JPL or something like that, maybe a aerospace company. And I finished, college, commissioned, and I commissioned as a medical service corps officer, which was my second choice. I was really frustrated because I was the top cadet in my ROTC battalion. I wanted aviation, and I didn't get it. But MS was the there's three places in the Army where you can become an aviator and fly. So aviation is the obvious one, but then medical services is where you fly medevac, And then intel, you can be a military intelligence officer and fly like the recon aircraft that are doing data collection and signals in intelligence type of stuff. And so I was selected for medical service corps, went to flight school. I dropped a flight packet, got picked up for flight school, did that. And I spent my first 10 years as a medevac pilot and really doing kind of point of injury to the front doors of the ER and that whole pre-hospital system of like picking patients up off the battlefield. And it was wild and crazy. I commissioned in '02, April of '02, right after, kind of 9/11 had happened. And so it was right into Iraq and Afghanistan and all the deployments and just, flying patients there. I was in, just to give you an idea of the pace and the craziness of it. I was the flight operations officer for the 54th Medical Company Air Ambulance in 2005, which was kind of the peak push during the Iraq conflict. And in I was there for 15 months. I was based out of Balad, Iraq. We flew 17,000 patients in 15 months. And these are like life, limb, or eyesight patients, right? Like the routine guys are going by ground, which is just, you look back and you're like, holy crap, man, that's like mind blowing. Um, so, anyways, long story short, I did medevac for the first 10 years. Spent 7 of those 10 years essentially away from my wife. Either I was deployed or she was deployed. Well, I think we already mentioned that she's still in the Army. And she's a medical corps officer, so she was a battalion and brigade surgeon with the 101st Airborne Division and then the 1st Infantry Division. Yeah, long story short, we spent 7 of 10 years apart. Right around the 10-year mark, we had just had our third kid, and my wife was like, "Hey, this single parent thing sucks. Maybe you should do something else." And I was like, "Yeah, Roger that. Household 6 has spoken." So I saluted the household commander and dropped my papers to get out. And I was at a place where I didn't have any payback or anything, but she still did. And so, because they paid for her undergraduate and medical school, so she still had an obligation, and so I dropped my papers, and I was about 3 weeks from getting out, and the chief of the medical service corps at the time, General Sheila Baxter, personally called me and was like, "Josh, like, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Man, I'm getting that." And she's like, "No, you're not. Like, how are we going to get you to stay?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. Like, what are you going to offer?" And she's like, "Well, what if we pay for grad school?" So I was like, "Oh, well, tell me more." And so, long story short, the Army offered to pay for grad school, and the Army has a program, and it's actually open to all services, but it's called Army Baylor. So I went to Baylor, University of Baylor, and or Baylor University, and I got a master's in healthcare administration and master's in business on the Army's dime, which was awesome. So double masters, and then transitioned from I was a 67 Juliet, which is aeromedical evacuation officer, to a health services controller, which is a 70 Charlie. And so basically, you're like the financial manager for the Army and doing all things managing Army budgets and dollars. So I became an Army comptroller, and then that really kind of started my path down the healthcare administration track. My first assignment out of grad school, I was the CFO for Irwin Army Community Hospital based out of Fort Riley, Kansas. And then from Fort Riley, Kansas, I went to the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, which is in DC. And that's a big $2.5 billion a year pharmaceutical research and development organization. So if you've ever been overseas or any service members have any taken like any anti-malarial drugs, every single anti-malaria drug on the planet has been invented at the Army Institute of Research. They're also doing like HIV research. They're doing all kinds of infectious disease research. So, you think about like big pharma doesn't, they're not incentivized to create any kind of drugs, prophylaxis, or treatments for infectious diseases, really, because we don't really have them, in our country. And so, we're Army, and not just the Army, but the military, the DoD send service members into all these austere environments in third world countries where there's all this, naturally occurring infectious diseases, Ebola and dengue and chikungunya and who knows what else. And service members get all these diseases. And so the DoD actually spends quite a bit of money developing drugs and prophylaxis and treatments for all these orphan diseases. And so I was there as the CFO managing all of those, the money, the finances for all those research programs, which was a really cool experience. And then after that, I moved up to the Surgeon General's office, and I worked for the Surgeon General. Started out my first year doing programming and working on the president's budget. And then a byproduct of my time as a CFO, both organizations, the community hospital and the Institute of Research, had some. They were basically running deficits when I showed up there, so they were in the hole. And I put programs in place to get them solvent and out of the hole, and I did well because of that, and got good evaluations, and people were happy with the work that I did. Well, once I was working for the Surgeon General, there were some other organizations that were insolvent, and so they actually came down and said, "Hey, we need to send you out and kind of go on the road to help these other." There were 11 other facilities that were having budget issues, so they used me like an internal consultant and sent me on the road to go consult and advise the commands at these facilities to help them get well financially. And I ended up doing that work for about 2 years. At which point, my reward for all of that was the opportunity to take command. So I went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I took command of the 586 Field Hospital, and I commanded the 586. I took command in July of 19, and then I had been in command for about 4 months when the first COVID stuff started happening, and so that was a really interesting time to be a hospital commander, is right through the thick of COVID. So a lot of COVID deployments all around the U.S. Doing that, and then after COVID kind of died off, then I got the opportunity to take command of the next organization, which was the 531st Hospital Center. And we went to the Middle East, and we were the level 1 trauma facility for CENTCOM. So I commanded that hospital in the Middle East, and then that's when I basically retired and transitioned out of that job, got out, and that's when I kind of started my civilian career. That was a little longer than 2 minutes, but a walk down the resume, or at least on the military side.
No, that's fantastic. You would have a hard time getting all of that into 2 to 3 minutes, and each one has always kind of doing my research on you, and I was like, man, what are all these weird titles? Like, it's I am continue to be surprised by kind of just unique situations kind of people fall into, and man, I can't think of a situation I've come across where the military like made your transition for you. Like you come in and you do your stuff, and then they're like, hey, we need to, it wasn't just like a we're gonna get out and like you need to go on to like learn to be a professional out in the world. It's like, no, we're gonna make you a professional and like put you in these roles like within the army. What a cool thing. And
Yeah.
I was wondering why you got the dual MBA MHA, and when you say it's on the army's dime, then that makes sense. I was like, man, what is this guy about?
No, it was one of those things, like I never in a million years thought I would be, running hospitals and being a CFO and, pharmaceutical and drug development companies. Like what is, like, how do you even do that? But it's kind of crazy to think that, you come out of grad school and they're like, okay, cool, here's this $250 million a year hospital that we need you to go and like manage the books. And like, 6 months ago, I was like balancing my own checkbook. And then now I'm running this, like, I'm the CFO for this, you know, 100, $200 million hospital. You're like, what the heck, man? Like, who else would do this? Like, nobody.
Yeah, that is wild. I got to hear about some of these circumstances where you're put into, and like you said, you brought several different hospitals or like activities that were in a deficit and kind of like got them on a good track. Talk to me about that. was the circumstance? Maybe walk us through one of them at a high level, and then I'd love to hear any kind of like commonalities you saw of what was driving the misappropriation of money, or what exactly was driving those problems.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say there was never any misappropriation, right? Like funds are always being used legally, just to throw that out there. But
I probably that was probably not the right word to use, but
yeah,
like
no, I don't want to like cast any light and like there was any illegal activities because Congress is very serious about how you use appropriated funds, right? But what happens is, you it's really a mix of like the organization's really big and you've got a lot of leaders making decisions at their levels and while you know you don't have great systems and processes in place, and I think is really the best way to explain it is that um, people are working in silos and in stovepipes and they're not necessarily communicating well and like the organization's making contracts for different things and they're not managing those contracts well, and then maybe the HR and the command group is hiring like in the healthcare. If you or, you go back to your time in military treatment facilities, about 70-80% of the employees in military treatment facilities are civilians, right? And so there's a it's paid for with a different pot of money that the facility itself has to manage. Whereas like if you're wearing a uniform, like that's paid by the service. And so the organization doesn't have to worry about all your pay and salaries for anybody that wears a uniform. And so if the organization doesn't manage their hiring processes well, they put a bunch of contracts out and they fail to manage those contracts well, they can get into a situation where they basically have overcommitted financially. And so, it really just comes down to stewarding those resources well, over communicating across all the different silos that are within an organization. And so for a financial person, if that commander doesn't have a strong CFO or G8 or S8 or whatever it is in your respective service, financial manager or controller that can very work cross functionally and kind of you know across the organization and really understand it and create a good picture, it creates opportunities for commanders to overcommit from a resourcing standpoint. And so then it's like, okay, sometimes they get themselves in trouble. And the big army typically, at least on the army side, and it's very similar across all the services, but usually they only have like at the geo level quarterly reviews, if that, of like how are the resources being executed. And so what can happen is, you get into like third quarter into the fiscal year, and now all of a sudden organizations are like, oh crap, like I don't have enough money to execute this, or maybe there's this huge maintenance thing that has to happen. Like I worked on when I was at the Army Institute of Research, we had a laboratory in Bangkok, Thailand that had like $50 million worth of deferred maintenance. And it's like, okay, the building's about to fall down. We have to fix this. Where do we get this money? And people are like, well, fix it. And, the general officer says, fix it. And then people start fixing it. And then they're like, figure it out, guy, like go find the money. And it doesn't always just, appear on trees, right? So you gotta, now you have to, you basically created a liability and you have to go take money, rob Peter to pay Paul. And so it's a lot of what I was doing was helping command teams learn, you know, which Peter they could rob so that they could finally pay Paul. And then some of it was a lot of expense reduction. Where can you draw down? Where do you have money that's buried, unexecuted on contracts, and how can you deobligate those funds, get it off those contracts so that you could actually use it to get yourself solvent and get healthy financially. So, um, and those were great lessons to learn because that's really what I think I parlayed into my career on the civilian side.
Walk us through some of those contract issues. You're saying that they were maybe not managing the contracts well. What does that mean? Are they not getting good bids? Are they, signing too many contracts and then they're overstaffed and, don't actually have the budget for that? Where exactly was the problem?
Yeah, so really what the problem comes down to is contract execution. So, there's good processes in place to kind of prevent you from overspending on a contract. But what happens is, like, let's say, like in the hospital environment, you might need 3 pediatricians, right? Well, the military doesn't have 3 pediatricians to give you, so you're going to go out and you're going to contract for some contract physicians. Well, those 3 pediatricians, you, in order to get that contract in place, you actually have to take, like, if it's, let's say it's $600,000 for 3 pediatricians on a contract, right? You have to take that, the military commander, when they sign that contract, that 600K, 100% of that money goes into like an escrow account that they can no longer touch. All of those funds get committed and obligated, and it's like they're already spent, right? And now the contractor has to go out and find 3 pediatricians. And then what happens is, like, as they find the pediatricians to do the work, then that escrow account is then drawn down, right? And if the contractor, let's say they go out and they can only find 2 pediatricians, and each one was going to, basically bill at the rate of 200K a year. Well, now you have $200,000 of money that's locked up in this contract, and you haven't gone out and modified the contract to deobligate those funds and get the money back out. And there's no way that it's going to be spent because the contractor never delivered the pediatrician to do the work. Are you with me so far?
Yeah.
And so now, like, let's say you didn't have that, that pediatrician doing the work, but you still have military families with kids that need pediatric care, right? And so if the MTF doesn't have the staff to do the work, where does that work go? It goes out to the network, right? So now your patients get referred downtown to a civilian practice. Well, that civilian practice then sends a bill. So now I basically prepaid for 3 pediatricians worth of work over here on the left, but now I'm getting a bill for 1 pediatrician's worth of work on the right because the contractor only filled 2 of the 3 spots. And so now I've spent 100% of the money on the 3 pediatricians, but now I have this other bill that's coming in left field. And so it's almost like I'm paying for 4 pediatricians, right? Until I go take the money off of the contract for the one that they failed to deliver and then move it over to pay the purchase care bill. And so that's how you can find yourself in a out of balance and basically in debt, insolvent. And the catch, the really hard thing about managing government money is that most of those dollars are 1 year appropriations, right? So at the end of the fiscal year, that money dies and it can't be spent anymore on, on anything. So if you don't manage contracts closely and take the money off that the contractor has failed to execute in accordance with the terms of the contract, you can't take it over and use it somewhere else, even though you may have had to go, leverage some other thing to get those services, and now you've incurred a cost. So even though it's sort of a net zero sum, if the contracts aren't managed well, you can find yourself basically insolvent and in the hole. And so that's what was happening. And so it was a matter of really, micromanaging the contract process, deobligating and shifting funds, and helping commanders understand, like, no, I need to take resources from this contract that you already locked up because the contractor isn't delivering what they said they could. And now you're incurring a cost outside of that we still have to go, pay off and make whole. So
Mhm.
that's fairly technical discussion, but I hope it made sense.
Yeah, no, I'm tracking with you. It sounds like you're working with so many different layers of complexity. Like, not only are you working inside the military organization, you're dealing with contracts, you're also in some of these cases overseas. And so that probably adds a whole nother element. And
Yeah.
then also, like, just my very vague basic knowledge of complex healthcare is like, that's so many things stacked on top of each other. I'm sure that it sounds like my actual nightmare, really.
Yes. Yeah. Dude, there's so many examples. There was one, like, here's just a small example. So at did some work at the joint staff with the joint staff surgeon, and um, there was a submariner, a guy who's a cook on a submarine who, they use trash compactors because they have to keep all the trash on the boat or on the submarine. They can't, offload it until they go to port. So the cook is putting trash in the trash compactor, chops his finger off with the trash compactor. So they're out somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. they have to surface, they surface the sub, a the coordination effort to get the guy off the boat. This was in my medical evacuation days at the high level. Submarine has to surface. We coordinate with the Portuguese Navy. They send a ship off the Azores out into the middle of the Atlantic. They steam the ship several hours. From there, it launches a helicopter, which goes to the submarine to pick the sailor up. Then the ship steams clear to like the Portugal or Spanish coast, and then they get another helicopter to take the sailor from the ship to a trauma center that's in I can't remember, it was Spain or Portugal. And then we had to coordinate for the neurosurgeon and the orthopedic surgeon to then go through and do the reattachment of the finger, and then all of the ICU level care that went into that there. And then we had to transition the soldier from there to launch stool. Launch stool got evacuated back to Walter Reed, where he ultimately spent time in the SRU rehab. It's like there's so many moving parts and pieces, so complex. So you're just like, dude, how does anything get accomplished?
That has got to be probably the most expensive
Oh yeah,
finger chop maybe in history. I'm
yeah,
sure millions of dollars spent to like
yeah,
handle this one individual.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I don't think a lot of people appreciate that and all the complexity. And like literally, you had like the entire medical operations cell at the Joint Staff in the Pentagon, like churning on this one dude and his finger.
Really raised a lot of disruption. I'm sure that he got a lot of a lot of shit for that when he got back eventually.
Yes.
Wow. What were the big lessons or takeaways kind of from this process? Like what did you learn about kind of financial management, or I'm sure that there's oversimplifying this by a mile, but the checkbook balancing nature of everything that you're doing in each of these, and like how does that kind of maybe apply to business? Like what is the application, I guess, for us?
Yeah, so that's actually a really easy question to answer, and that it comes down to communication, right? I would say like being a CFO. So I was a CFO in the military, and now I work as a essentially a virtual or fractional CFO for private companies, and um, I tell people that probably 70-80% of what I do is just communication. It really comes down to communicating cross functionally and being able to really translate complex concepts and processes in a way that anybody can understand, whether that's a military commander or a service company owner. And so I would say, yeah, let's say 70% communication, maybe 20% like the actual like systems, understanding systems and processes, and then 10% of it is actually just like doing the transaction work, and balancing the books and doing the tactical like actions on the objective.
So it's not necessarily that people have the inability to balance the checkbook, so to speak, but it's navigating all of these moving parts and, as you said, communicating between each, the expectations and fulfilling those.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would pitch it back to you, right? Like you're a data scientist, data analyst. What is the hardest part, and what is the main part of what you do as a data analyst?
It's well, at a high level, it's communicating. That's you
Yeah,
to kind of fulfill right in there. There's kind of some other back end processes, but on when it comes to the front side, it is communication. It's how do
yeah.
we take a lot of information and communicate it in a way to like effectively take action.
To tell the story, right? It's all about like how do you take the data, manipulate it, process it, clean it, and use that data to tell a story, right? That tells the story that you want to tell. And and it's no different in finance, right? So for me as a CFO, it's all about like what is the story that the numbers are telling. And I think you can kind of see that in the way that the services are billed, right? Like you can basically hire a bookkeeper for anywhere from like $100 to 500 or $600 a month that is doing all of the transaction work. And it's a lot of work. Like keeping the books, like if you're doing the books for a company that's doing $5 to $10 million a year and they have a high level of transaction flow, it's a ton of work to categorize all those transactions, make sure they're hitting the right, lines in the general ledger, that everything is being classed appropriately, especially if there's multiple locations. And there's just a lot of like nug work of getting down and getting dirty and like, clicking the different buttons and making sure that everything is going where it's supposed to be going, right? But that's like typically anywhere from $100 to 500 or 600 bucks that you're going to get paid to do that that all those transaction level works, right? And then if you come up to the CFO level, now we're looking at anywhere from five to $20,000 a month that people are charging, in my field to just be the translator, right? The guy that can look at the balance sheets and the cash flow statements and the P&Ls and and can read the all of the general ledger and all the complex data that's stuffed in there, and then take that information, synthesize it into something that can help a business owner make strategic decisions, whether they're investments or hiring or hold now, or maybe a business valuation, or now's the time to sell, now's the time to grow, now's the time to whatever, right? Like that's you're getting paid the big bucks, right? That what you can charge for is really about your ability to synthesize those complex topics and translate that in a way that is understandable by people who can't look at the matrix and see what it's telling them. And so I think it's the same for you. I love data, and I'm a data guy, right? Like in God we trust, and all others must bring data, right? And so as a data guy, it's all about being able to look at it and use that data to tell the story that you want it to tell.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting and a great way to pitch that, I think. I've got one more question about kind of the your time in the army and the application of that, and then we can talk about what you're doing now. Let's say that you were in charge of all of the military hospitals in the world, from like a military perspective,
Yeah.
and you run the budget, all of that good stuff. What is the first thing that you're doing? What were the problems that you saw at a very high level that maybe were systemic, that maybe are were beyond your control, even in command of those things? Like, well, I'm
Yeah.
sure that you're fighting an uphill battle on a lot of those things, I'm sure. What ought to be fixed that isn't right now?
Well, so there's really two huge problems that like the surgeons general of the various services have, right? And it's pretty simple at its core. So, what's the purpose of the military? Why do we have a defense department? Do you know what the stated objective is of the defense department?
I actually don't know.
Yeah. So it's first and foremost to deter, right? So the Defense Department exists. If you go out and you read, our all our various national defense strategy documents, the primary existence of the Defense Department is first and foremost to be a deterrent, right? To keep people from wanting to attack us. And then if deterrence doesn't work, the next reason that we exist is to fight and win the nation's wars, right? And so the primary objective of the military healthcare system, the MHS writ large, is really all about readiness, right? Because like you might have, if I'm a battalion commander or brigade commander, let's say I'm the commander of the 101st Airborne Division, even, right? Like that commander is super strategic, right? And his main thing is like, if I have to go to the Ukraine or I have to go to China or wherever the latest and greatest geopolitical threat is, it's really about what is the forces that I can amass, right? And what's the one thing that takes people out of the fight? It's medical readiness, right? Like you wouldn't believe that like a guy gets a toothache, if he has a cavity that leads to an abscess in his mouth, he's ineffective. He can't fight. He's a liability on the battlefield, right? You said that your wife is pregnant, which is awesome. Congratulations, right? Well, now she's no longer deployable, right? So there's a commander. I don't know if she's on a ship or what, but there's a commander that runs that ship that now has to, he's only got what he's got. I'm assuming it's a he. So um, whoever that commander is, how you got to go to war with the team that you got, right? And if 20% of my team can't even get in the fight because they're not medically ready, well, now I'm fighting with 80%, right? And so the military healthcare system's primary purpose is really all about readiness. That's why I like it's kind of backwards. Like when you compare your healthcare experience in the military to what someone in the civilian sector would be like. First thing you do when you come in, we vaccinate you against everything, right? We pull your wisdom teeth out. We screen you for all different kinds of things, right? We are trying to proactively prevent any future issues, right? Why do we pull wisdom teeth? Almost every soldier comes in, they get their wisdom teeth pulled. We do that because wisdom teeth get impacted, and then you basically come out of the fight, right? Well, by proactively pulling your wisdom teeth, we would just guarantee that that will never be an issue in the future that would create a readiness issue, right? We vaccinate you against everything under the sun so that on a moment's notice we can send you in. We don't have to worry about you getting sick from some anthrax or smallpox or whatever else, right? We're doing a lot of, it's the whole, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of, I forget how it goes, but you get the idea. And so the first problem that military healthcare system is solving is the readiness problem. Are soldiers medically ready to go fight and win the nation's wars? Right? It's the tactical commander's job to make sure that you're ready from a skill standpoint. But if you're getting sick or you have a orthopedic injury or a dental emergency or some other thing, like that most likely is preventable, right? The same reason we do PT, right? You can't sprinkle fitness on people, so you have to do the prevention every day. The second hard question that really challenges the surgeons general and the services is, we've created this benefit for family members, right? And so, as a dependents, they now are getting their health care. And over the years, the military kind of swings back and forth where we kind of, in a garrison environment where we're not fighting wars, we spend that healthcare money on building up the the care and the support in the MTF for family members to get seen and get cared for there, because it creates, medicine is one of those things where it's like it's a practice, right? There's an art to medicine, and you have to see patients to get the reps in to be a proficient healthcare provider. Our surgeons, like, it's great. We have a 90 7 or 99% survival rate on the battlefield. Well, the reason that we have that is because when we're not at war, we have our surgeons embedded in the trauma centers around the United States working, military green suit wearing providers embedded in all these trauma centers, working on guys that are gunshot wound victims and stab victims in these areas around our country where there's high crime rates, right? So that when they get to the Iraqs and the Syrias and the Ukraines, it's not the first time they've seen somebody, with gunshot wounds and stab wounds. And so, it's all about there's a readiness of the war fighting force, but there's also a readiness component of the medical force. And so, we bring dependents in to help keep the medical force ready. But in an ideal world, they would all go out to the network, right? It would all be purchase care. But then you're balancing from a financial standpoint. It costs more to buy it than it does to make it, right? So it costs, and these are some high level numbers from something called the Milliman study. If to make healthcare for a family of four in the military healthcare system, it costs us about $18,000 a year. That's what the DoD spends on healthcare for a family for when you get your care inside the military healthcare system. If you go downtown and you get it in the network and we buy that care, it costs us about $28,000 a year. Well, that's a $10,000 delta between making and buying for a family of four. And you've got, what is how big is the active force in the Defense Department right now? You're talking millions of service members, and then all of their beneficiaries that, basically 3X's or 4X's, whatever that is. So it's a scale problem. It's huge. That's why, the healthcare is consuming, like 25% of the entire gross domestic product of the United States, writ large. And the DoD is just a small, microcosm of that.
That was all really interesting and a really unique perspective of I've never had the chance to talk to somebody that's kind of like sat in the balance of like the financial plus the medical situation. I think I'd be remiss to not like expand on that with a couple more questions if you don't
Sure.
mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
The first one is going to sound a little bit impersonal, but bear with me.
Mhm.
Should women who are pregnant be allowed to be in the service while they are pregnant from like the readiness and the cost perspective that you're describing there?
That
It's a
I can,
super hard question for me to
yeah,
ask because my
I
wife
can
is
answer it.
pregnant and like
I can answer it two ways, right? Like, so from a purely objective standpoint, right? Like if I'm a commander, which I've been a battalion and a brigade level commander, it hurts, right? Like I got to go to war with the team that I have. And each time I lose somebody, like I ran a hospital in CENTCOM, right? I had people that couldn't deploy, right? And so now I'm going down range without all of my team members, right? And if you're a pit crew on a race car team, if you go to the race and you don't have your like, your jack man, how are you going to change the tires? Right. And so like as a hospital commander, here's a great little micro example of that. Like I might only have two radiology techs in my hospital, right? And I might have one radiologist in my hospital. I might have one a cardiothoracic surgeon in my hospital. I only have one anesthesiologist in my hospital, right? Well, if that guy or girl, let's to go to your example, if that is a female person in that particular skill and they're pregnant, that's great. Like I'm happy for them. Like, and of course I want them on the team. They're a part of our team. We love them. I have relationships with these people and, you work with them for a long time. But if it just so happens that they're pregnant during the time when you get activated and you go on a mission, now you're going without this key player, right? And like healthcare is one of those places where you have all these, we call them low density MOSs, right? Like you might only have one or two of these super specialized people, right? I had one cardiothoracic surgeon, I had one neurosurgeon, I had one pulmonologist, I had one one of like pick all the different ologists that you can have in a healthcare organization, and you basically have one. And if that person happens to be a female that gets pregnant, well, now I'm going to war without that person, right? Well, that's a pretty crappy position to be in if I'm responsible for providing all the healthcare for this. Right now, think of the second and third order effects of that. Like if I don't have this ologist, now I got to like go into the local national community. Let's say I'm in Syria and I got to go find somewhere in the Middle East where there's a host nation provider that can do this service, right? That can provide that same skill set. They're not trained at the same level and standard that we are. They don't know how to operate in our system. I'm basically going to take you, Brock, if you're the patient, and I'm going to send you out into a Syrian hospital with a US escort. And we're going to basically say, hey, we're going to scrub in and be a part of this procedure and watch you do it. And I'm just going to trust that, you're the best thing that we can get for Brock in the moment. Right. Like think of the risk that creates for the rest of the force. Um, so, from a commander standpoint, like, um, you put me in a really bad spot. Uh, Now, what we do is we then, if somebody gets pregnant, the way we work around that is we go, okay, I'm going to reach into this other hospital and I'm going to steal theirs, right? I rob Peter to pay Paul. And now that hospital commander has to do without, but hopefully they're still in the States and they can, use the network. The network in the healthcare example, it's sort of like a balloon, right? Like when the military squeezes, we push patients out to the civilian community, and that acts as like a pressure relief valve, right? When the balloon, you squeeze the balloon and it kind of squirts out one side or it sticks out. We can, when you're CONUS, you have the ability to tap into the civilian community. But if you go overseas, I don't have that same ability, right? So I need I really have to rely on those people to be there. So from a purely objective commander, put my commander hat on, I would say, yeah, you put me in a really bad position to do that. It's hard. I do think that there are ways around it, but that just creates situations where, um, and that's what we do, right? Our workaround so that we can, have pregnant women in the service and give them, the time that they need to have kids and to have their postpartum leave and to be mom and have that, really important first, you know, few months with the baby. Um, and to get a care team in place, after those first few months. The way we work around that is we grab other people. The downfall is that, like, if you and I are both, you know, ologists, and and I all of a sudden at the last minute my unit's going and I dip out like, oh whoops, I'm pregnant, and I don't communicate that well. It goes back to communication. Well, now I'm, 3 weeks or 2 weeks from heading out the door, and some GO is going to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Brock, congratulations. You have 2 weeks until you leave on this deployment, and you're blindsided, and it impacts your life and your relationship, and because this person failed to communicate that they were pregnant, or it, didn't become an issue until the last minute." And so that happens. And I've seen it where we had a pregnant female soldier that became non-deployable. And then the only other person that could go was this other guy, and his wife was pregnant, right? And so now he's going to miss the birth of his child, and not going to be present because he got deployed in place of the other soldier where it was a pregnant female, right? So I mean, there's no good answer to your question. That's one of those you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, I think. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And that isn't just picking on pregnant women by any means. That is representative of a much larger problem, as you spoke to it, readiness. And
yeah,
there are many things that can take people out of the field for readiness issues, whether it be a toothache, whether it be mental or physical health problems, whether it be pregnancy, it's all of those things.
yeah.
So, an interesting perspective. I appreciate you dealing with a kind of a hot question. I like it.
Well, I think the mental, just really quick before you move on, the mental side of it is it's so big now. And for so many years, like a lot of people are like, oh wow, this hasn't been an issue in the past. Like there's a great book called The Lost Division, and it's about the like 30,000 soldiers during World War II that were shell shocked and were basically like stuck in like a holding company way behind the enemy, or way back behind the lines, in the support areas, that they were just in combat ineffective. But it was the same thing. It's mental health, and it's just only now that we've really kind of, the services really started to say, like, and own it and say, yeah, this is a problem, a legitimate thing, and really encouraging soldiers to speak out. So I think I think we've come a long way. It's still a problem. It's definitely a big issue, but yeah,
Yeah, I certainly agree. It's I think that is going forward one of going to be the biggest challenges that the service faces, is in addition to the other threats in the other parts of the world, is like we're really facing a big mental health challenge, and not only like allowing people to come forward and talk about things, but how does that flow into this conversation that we're having about readiness, and what does that mean for exiting the service,
yeah.
in terms of disability and the impacts to VA healthcare and
Mhm.
all of those things. One more question about healthcare that just kinda popped up
Okay.
on the spot
Bring it.
here.
Bring it.
Has US healthcare prices been driven up because we like to go to the doctor?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. The model is like the classic example that healthcare people use is, think about your car, right? Imagine if you used your insurance, your car insurance, to go get your oil changed, right? Like what would happen to your car insurance rates if every time you need to get your tires rotated and get your oil changed, you submitted an insurance claim?
Going way up.
Yeah, right. All day long. And so, that's what happens is in our system is, people are basically going in for the little stuff, the routine care, and the checkups and the physicals and the everything else. And every time they do that, they're making a health insurance claim. And so, that absolutely drives the prices up, right? Because insurance at the end of the day is just a statistics game. And, they pool healthy with unhealthy, and then they average out what the spend is per person. And then, they use that to, based on your demographics of age and sex and what they call social determinants of health, will underwrite like essentially what it's going to cost you or cost them to care for you, right? Like the average 21-year-old male goes to the doctor like 0 times a year, right? Like they don't go unless they're dying. And then and then like a newborn child goes to the doctor like 5 or 6 times in the first 18 months of life, right? Because you're going to get all your vaccines and everything else. So they know with pretty good precision what it's going to cost. Using all the actual tables and statistics and big data, they know that when you're age 0 to 5, it's going to cost them so much per year to take care of you. And then when you're ages 6 to 10 versus 11 to 15 and so on, they've got it chunked into these 5-year kind of life categories, age categories that we know how much it's going to cost, right? And then as you spend a lot in the first like 2 years of your life, and then starting around like age 35, it just is like a general slope where then by the time you get to like 70 and 80, it's huge. There's some data out there, and I'm not going to quote it well, but basically like it's like 80 or 90% of all healthcare money is spent on like the last like 5 or 10 years of life, right? Like we spend just a disgusting amount of money on, kind of sustaining the final years of most people's lives in proportion to all the rest of your life.
Yeah, I was just curious to ask somebody that's spent some time analyzing the financial part of it, because it is a really big problem, and it's a convenience that we are afforded in this country, and it's beautiful to be able to hop on a call and ask your doctor to tell you that you have a cold. But I think some of the repercussions that we're feeling from that are, I don't know if that people are making that connection, that using the healthcare actually makes it more expensive, which
Yeah.
you want people to, that's why you have it. However, I think health and wellness and just like general health stuff, are you exercising, doing all of those things to kind of reduce and minimize those things, are not people's first and foremost thought.
No, I think what you're going to see, and I mean, you're already seeing it in the private sector, is um, this move towards, they call it value-based care, which is really, it's all about like, are you getting better outcomes for the money that you're spending? And then there's another thing called capitation, which is essentially the payers, the insurance companies are trying to shift the burden, the cost burden they're trying to shift it to both the providers and to the patient. And so, really the goal is to incentivize and drive behaviors to focus more on prevention, because again, an ounce of prevention is a much cheaper than a pound of cure, right? And so yeah, the more that we can kind of change those behaviors, that's the hard thing though, right? It goes back to behaviors. You might only have 20, 30, 40 minutes a year in a healthcare provider's office where they can lecture you and talk to you about like stop drinking sodas and start eating healthier and start working out. But the reality is that, your health outcomes are greatly determined by how you're spending all the rest of the time when you're not in the doctor's office. What are you stuffing in your face? Are you actually working out? All of your choices that you make along the way that add up. And that's the hard part, is that, the system is still trying to work through how does it create the right incentives to where you're making better decisions that ultimately impact that. I think what you'll see, like direct primary care is, are you familiar with direct primary care?
uh, at a high level.
Yeah, so essentially it's sort of like the McDonald's version of healthcare, right? Like you can go to a direct primary care provider, and if I need a immunization or I want to get a checkup, it's like 20 or $30 or $50. Some of them now are doing like subscription models, almost like Netflix, where I pay, 50 or $60 a month per person, and I get access to that provider whenever I want. I can text them or call them or do video visits. And then in addition to that, I would have like an HSA or some type of a catastrophic health insurance that only pays like if I get admitted to a hospital, and it's this big, huge healthcare expense. But for all your routine care, it's basically a la carte, and you're just paying cash for it. Um, so that you're seeing a lot more of that happen now, and I think that we'll see that trend continue.
Want to talk about what you do now before I use up all of my allotted time here with you today. You say on your LinkedIn, I help startups and SMBs doing $1 million to $10 million with bookkeeping, accounting, FP&A, and fractional CFO advisory services. Let's maybe start with what does that mean for the layman? And obviously your background has greatly illustrated why you're capable of doing that. Would love to talk about why choosing to go fractional, what is this opportunity that you're seeing, and like why are these small businesses struggling with that, and maybe we'll get into where the industry is going. Is fractional the future?
Yeah. Okay. Um, so at a very rudimentary level, like I just help business owners understand their numbers, right? And that's at the most fundamental. Like I can do that. I can own that whole process end to end, from their bookkeeping all the way up to like helping, small but fairly large growing businesses make strategic decisions. We can also do like both buy side and sell side M&A transaction advisory. Like, so if you want to buy a business or you're looking to sell your business and go to market with it, I can help you with, making sure you get the best valuation when dealing with private equity or venture capital. So, really, we can do everything from bookkeeping, your accounting offering, if you want to do like modeling and build financial models and really look at the data and some analytics around that, we can do that. And then just the strategic level advisory on the CFO side. The way that I got here was so I literally retired out of command, and I did it absolutely what they tell you not to do. Like I was in the Middle East in command all the way up to like 3 weeks before I literally came off the rolls. And now they've got all these transition programs where you can do these like 12 week long like internship programs, and all this like there's these great programs where they kind of help you get your resume ready and do all this stuff and prepare for transition. And I literally like was deployed, came back, like went through CIF, turned in all my gear, and did my reintegration stuff. I did all my VA separation physical stuff while I was in the Middle East, which is also like not recommended. And then I got out, and so I had been away from my family. I was deployed, and so when I first got out, like I wasn't even thinking about a job. I was just like, man, I need to like it's summertime. I need to reconnect with my kids. We PCSed. My family had just moved, so it was all about like I'm just gonna spend the first couple of months as I got out, like hanging out with my kids and being dad and being present because I'd been gone. So I did that, and it was awesome. It was amazing. And, I just played football with and volleyball and soccer with my kids. And then in that process, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't reach out to kind of to your point when we very first started talking. I didn't leverage the veteran community at all. And hindsight being 2020, I probably should have. Um, but I did reach out to a couple of mentors because I was like, I don't know what the heck I'm going to do. I don't have anything lined up. I just needed to like get home and be with my family, and then I'll figure this out later. And so one of my mentors that I had worked with, he was like, "Hey man, you're so good at this finance stuff. Like, and when you were doing all that internal consulting for the Surgeon General, like, why don't you like you could totally do that for a small business." So I was like, "Okay, cool." I don't even know how to like start those conversations. I had another friend who's not military. he owns a landscaping business in Kansas City. And he's like, dude, you should join this BNI group, which is a business networking international. I don't know if you're familiar with that group, but it's basically business owners that come together. They meet once a week, and they agree to pass referrals to each other, and it's exclusive. So like, unlike if you join like the Chamber of Commerce, like you might show up and like there might be 20 other business consultants or 20 other realtors or whatever. And it's sort of a sword fight, right? Like everybody's in there and you have competitors are in there. Well, in this BNI group, it's exclusive. So only you, like if I'm in the group now as a business consultant, I'm the only business consultant that can be in our group. And if anybody has any consulting type of clients, I'm the exclusive person that they will pass referrals to. So I joined this group. I didn't have any connections. We had just moved to this new town. And it was actually a blessing. It was such a great thing that my friend was like, dude, just do this. Like I get a ton of business from this group. So yeah, like I just started. One of the things that they do in these BNI groups is they call them one-to-ones. And each week they want you to meet with at least one other business owner in the group. So in my group, we have 48 other business owners that meet weekly. And so we all meet corporately once a week. And then outside of that, I meet for at least 90 minutes once a week with one other member of the group. Sometimes I'll do 2 or 3 in a week. But you're just going deep. You're sharing just like we're talking now, kind of learning about each other's backgrounds, learning about each other's businesses. What's the ideal business referral for you and your business? So that way they kind of learn you, they learn to trust you, and they learn to pass business to you. And it was awesome for me because, one of my command philosophies was, I some of my army friends make fun of me, but I always used to say it's all about the ships, right? And they're like, "Hey, bro, this is the army, not the navy." But my philosophy was, we're in the shipbuilding business. We build relationships, friendships, mentorship, leadership, right? Like all the ships are great things in business. And so that idea of being a shipbuilder that I had in the military and my philosophy really was like fit perfectly with BNI, right? They're all about these relationships, and that's what helps you grow your business. So I started meeting with all these 48 other small business owners and just talking to them like, hey, like doing the same thing I would do when was doing my internal consultant for the army. I'd show up and I'd say like, how's it going? Right? Like, how's business? What's the biggest thing that, what's your biggest challenge? What are you struggling with? And it was amazing that like these guys, I kind of expected people to be guarded, but all these business owners were just like totally open kimono. Like, here's where I'm struggling. Here's what I don't understand. And like, long story short, like 95% of them struggle with their finances. They didn't understand their numbers. They were having like, one example, like I just met with a business owner yesterday. She's got a business and her annual gross revenues are like 1.5 million a year, which is like, for all like externally you look at it and go, man, you're crushing it. But she's like, I'm cash poor. Like I'm literally like, paycheck to paycheck here, like just trying to get my employees paid. And she couldn't understand where all the cash flows were going in her business, right? And where's it all going? I don't get it. And so, I just started talking to him about that and helping him with it. And just over time came to the realization that the greatest need was like, these guys don't have the same finance background that I have. And the numbers are just super confusing to them, especially when you start getting to the $1 million plus level and scales and it gets, you're writing these big checks and they don't see how it all connects together. So that was really kind of when I started my initial consulting, that's what I was seeing. And then for my current company and business, Cordis, um, one of the companies that I was doing some Lean Six Sigma type of operational consulting with, uh, their numbers were a disaster. And I was like, dude, like who is doing your books? And they were like, oh, it's the CPA. And I was like, time to fire this guy. So we fired their CPA. And I wasn't doing finance stuff for them. I was doing this Lean Six Sigma process consulting for them at the time. And I'm like, look, your numbers are a dumpster fire. Like you need to fix this. And because it's impacting these other parts of the organization. And so via Twitter, I had found like 3 other guys that were CPAs that had a good presence on there and doing some advisory stuff. So I pulled those 3 in, had the business owners interview them, and one of them ended up choosing this guy, Devin, who's my partner now. So they chose Devin to go forward. Devin came in and cleaned up the books and kind of got all the financials on the right track. And anyways, we started working together, and then through that, like, Devin and I were both like, hey, I like the way you work, you like the way I work, like, we should think about partnering, because he had this software offering, like, let's scale it. We'll bring some more CFOs in, and so we'll start hiring some people, and that's really kind of Cordis how it started. Was he and I partnered up. He brought the software piece, I brought the CFO piece, and we've just been growing the business from there. So kind of just it just happened, it was not planned.
Yeah. No, that's I feel like a lot of the best opportunities come from mixing stuff around and kind of getting out into the weeds, and you start to see things like, oh, there's an opportunity here, and maybe we got to kind of chase this line down a little bit. Can you maybe give us a sense for like how many clients you're serving? Any numbers if you want to share, you can kind of give us some sense of scale for what you guys are doing on that, and maybe talk about why or like what it would cost to hire you as if I'm a small and medium business owner to come in and take a look at my books and go through that process.
Yeah, sure. So right now we have 8 clients that are on board. We just partnered up in February, so it's end of April now. So we've got 8 that are onboarded, and we're providing both software and services for. And so the software again is our dashboard that connects up to your QuickBooks or your Zero or FreshBooks or whatever accounting software that you have, and visualizes kind of what your KPIs are and what your cash flows are. So it helps business owners see it without looking at a bunch of numbers. And then from a services offering, like we have some folks that are just on board for the bookkeeping. We have some that's like bookkeeping and then full like monthly accounting and reconciliation and all of that. And some more of like once a month, I'll basically go through their financials. I'll record a Loom, or we'll have a 30-minute meeting, and I'll send that to them as a business owner. It's just sort of like a a situation report, if you will, to use military language, on like where they're at with their financials. And so something like that, like just the software and the accounting, depending on the size of the business, is going to range anywhere from $800 to like $3,000, on that scale of like 1 million to about 10 million. That's sort of our sweet spot. Once you get over 10 million a year, you can usually afford like a controller and a CFO. So those businesses usually have someone full-time on staff. And so we try to straddle the gap between, like, I've got a bookkeeper. Like most small businesses, if you're below $1 million, or even I would say to the like 500,000 a year annual gross revenue, usually a bookkeeper is sufficient, right? But they're not going to be giving you those insights and really helping you understand like how to grow and scale. They're just going to be doing the transactional work, and making sure invoices are tagged and processed and all of that. Um, and then really just kind of stepping it up from there. Like if you want full CFO advisory, like I said, that can go anywhere from 5,000 all the way up to 20,000 a month, depending on the scale and scope of what you're looking for. We have one client that essentially wants us to work as, they have a CFO, but they want us to work as a controller. And so we're sort of working to augment their financial team. We've got another client that's a YouTuber that we're basically just kind of doing the books and the accounting. We've got another client. We have 2 clients right now that we're just doing pure M&A work for. So quality of earnings, cash proofing. They're in the acquisition phase, and they're trying to roll up some other businesses. And so that's not it's different from like our long, ongoing, working with somebody all year long. We'll just work with them through the transaction. But so yeah, so 8 there. We've got a few in the pipeline. They always getting inquiries, kind of here and there as the weeks go on, which is fun. A lot of engagement. Almost everything has come through Twitter for us, which has been interesting. That's how you and I met. And then so Twitter's been very fertile ground for us. And yeah, did I answer all of your question there?
Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah, I have to be careful about I've told myself I have to limit how much I talk about how great Twitter is because I could easily make this entire show just about all the interesting people there. But yeah, a very great place to find new work, new business, and a lot of SMB folks on there. So that's right up your alley.
Yeah.
I I've seen this kind of proliferation of and popularity of fractional roles. How is that like, I don't want to say is that new? I'm sure it's always kind of existed to some extent, but it seems like they've really gained in popularity over the past couple of years. Is that something like a trend that you see continuing and like growing? Um, and like why is that, or is that not important?
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think COVID really was kind of the catalyst to help the fractional anything take off. Right now, you've got fractional COOs, fractional CXOs, CROs, CMOs. Like, name the C level, and there's somebody out there doing a fractional version of it. I think before COVID, there was a niche where there were a lot of people that were, I don't know if I would call them fractional, but they were like transitional. So, like, let's say a company got rid of somebody, like somebody wasn't working out, they fired them, they needed an interim COO or CFO. There was a niche of people that would just kind of come in and fill the void and be like the full-time CFO, for example, until they could, do the executive search and fill the gap. Because the executive search can take quite a long time. And they're when you get to the C level, they're very much more interested in that culture fit and all the sort of the intangibles. And it's not always about just what's on the resume and the skill. It's a lot about how do you connect and fit with that particular C level team. And so there's a lot more that goes into that. And so there was a niche of, I think, a healthy niche of people that were just doing these sort of interim C level roles or transitional roles where they would just come in, fill the gap until the executive search was complete, and then they would help transition the new exec in and then step away and then go find the next one. Now, I think with COVID, and everybody working from home and the advent of all of this, Zoom and everything else, I think um, it just created a lot more opportunity for that and opened the I think people just got more comfortable working remotely and with people like asynchronously. And I think that really served to, open the market up. And I do think you will just see more and more of it. Especially now, like why, I as a finance guy, I love it because look at how much it costs to have an office building. Like Salesforce just laid off, thousands of engineers and people out in the Bay Area, and they're vacating these, like 800,000 and million square foot office buildings because it costs millions of dollars to have all that infrastructure. And if I can get the same productivity from people when they're working from home, and all I got to do is like give them a laptop and make sure they got good internet, and I've created, COVID kind of forced people to create the systems and processes to be able to manage remote workforce. There's been a lot of just in the business world, a lot of just collective knowledge growth and abilities around, doing that better and having those skill sets and capabilities. Um, I think you're just going to see more and more businesses like shun having a big infrastructure overhead expense when they could get the job done asynchronously, using remote things. I think, yeah, to long answer to your short questions, I think you're just going to see it continue to grow.
If you had to pick one major thing that small business owners constantly mess up when it comes to their finances, and something that you could articulate that they could go and maybe do in their business today, or kind of change the way that they're operating today, what kind of advice or input do you think you would offer them?
The first one would just be like do monthly reconciliations. You'd be amazed at how many people have never reconciled their books. Like I look at people's QuickBooks all the time, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, have you ever logged into this thing? You've been in business for how long? Um, seriously, like I'm not kidding. I think like that's probably the biggest one is just like log in, do the monthly reconciliation. It's not hard. If you're a small business, like take your bank statement. QuickBooks has tutorials online that'll walk you through it. And you take your end of month balance from last month, you take this month, closing balance, and you have your bank statement and you have the transactions that are in QuickBooks, and you just go in and say, yep, it matches, it matches, it matches, it matches, right? You can categorize it, and that's really it. And like once you learn it, it should take you 20 minutes or so. And you can pay, like that's another one. Pay if you don't know how to do it, go hire a bookkeeper. You don't have to hire them to do your books. You can actually pay a bookkeeper just to sit with you for an hour or two one time and walk you through, whether it's on Zoom or um, in person. Have them sit with you over your shoulder and just walk you through a monthly reconciliation. And there's so much value in knowing that, like, when I open it up and I look at my financials, I know they're right. There's, there will be little things where there's inconsistencies, and you want to catch that. The other thing that does is like I've worked with 5 or 6 business owners now where they've had employees that were basically stealing from them. And it wasn't until we, dove into their books did they figure out like, well, I wasn't writing that check. Like, who was that check to? And it's like, holy cow, man, like your guy has been writing checks to himself and stealing from you, and sad to say that that's happened like a handful of times. And this is even in a very small sample size of business owners. So, it happens. And if you're not paying attention, it's going to happen to you. I think the other thing that I would encourage business owners to do if they don't have one is like get a good CRM or like field management software. That's the other thing that like made my mind explode. Like I was like melting down inside. Like I would sit with these business owners, and they've got like $500,000-600,000 a year businesses, and they're literally like it's the classic like military officer with their little green notebook, and it's got like papers falling out of it, and that's their whole entire business. And like if they drop that thing, like all their business knowledge, or they leave it somewhere, it's all gone. Um, and it was just sort of almost hard to believe that there were so many business owners that didn't have like a basic system for like, here's all my customers, here's what they ordered, here's like the simple stuff that would be in a CRM. It was like you'd be shocked to see how many people don't have that.
Josh, this is a really, really fun conversation and insightful into many areas that I wasn't anticipating.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for you sharing your knowledge and time with me today. What can myself and or the listeners do to be useful to you?
Useful to me. Oh man. Well, if you know anybody that's running a business and needs some help with their financials, yeah, I'd love an introduction. I'm passionate about it. I love working with small business owners that are like hungry to grow. That's one thing that you get in the government, and there's sort of a malaise. Not there's some hard chargers, but a lot of government is like status quo, right? Don't walk the boat. We're just trying to get through this without any problems, and it's not like this, high performing organization. There are parts of it that are, but not all of it. And the thing I really love about all the clients that I've been working with and the small business owners is like this is their livelihood. So they're all in. They're hungry to grow and succeed. And so if you got somebody that is just like they're a gunner and they're getting after it and they're hungry and they just don't have the skills, like I would love to work with that person. That would be awesome. I'd love to help them grow and scale their business and help them understand their numbers.
Fantastic. Josh, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Brock. This has been fun.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. Your listenership helps me better educate people like you and the rest of our nation's military, both past and present, on building a successful life outside of military service. If you're looking for more ways the top vets are leading more effective lifestyles, building businesses, and using the resources designed specifically for you, press here for a selection of some of the best clips. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date, and I will be talking with you soon.